Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very special CDPE Zoom session. My name is Tony Martinez. I'm going to be your co-host today, and I'm thrilled and honored to have the man, the myth, the legend himself, Alex Charfen, on the call with me. And he is no stranger to a lot of you, and that's why so many of you are on the call today. But Alex, where are you, brother? I want to see that beard you got going on over there.
I'm right here, Tony.
You're rocking that look, bro. I love it.
Thank you.
Listen, I can't grow much anymore. I'm just kind of like just shining it more and more every day.
Well, I'm losing more and more up here, so I figure if I grow here, I have future transplants. We're good.
You know what? I keep hearing that. I figured if you're behind that, then it's got to be a strategy that many of us need to implement immediately. Brother, I can't thank you enough for taking time out of your schedules. I mean, you're out there building empires, not just for yourself, but for a multitude of entrepreneurs out there. So thank you for carving out some time in your schedule. Today, I want to keep it more conversational. You know, I do have a few PowerPoint slides that I'll put up just to kind of keep me on target as far as what I like to cover in our short 60 minutes. But I think it's only fair to start at the beginning, and that is go down a little trip down memory lane. And because, you know, a lot of the folks that are on the call right now will be listening are who I like to affectionately refer to as the OGs, the old guard or original gangsters, whichever you prefer. And these are the individuals that were part of the CDP movement, in some cases from the very beginning. And you probably recognize some of the names and everything on there. So for those that are not as familiar with the CDP, the Certified Distressed Property Expert education, how did it start? What you know, I know it was you and your amazing wife, Katie, but just a brief history of what motivated you to take that upon yourself.
So Tony, first, I would just like, I see several names that I recognize here. It's awesome seeing you, Dolores, Brandon, Marilyn, so cool. If those of you who don't have your cameras on, if you could turn them on, see, Tony and I are like public speakers, and speaking to a wall of void is so painful. It's actually horrible. It's like COVID has made it so that I sign on a Zoom call and I start getting like nervous, anxious feelings because nobody's going to turn on everything. And so it would be awesome if you guys could turn on, some of you could turn on your video. I mean, there's a few of you, you can keep your video off, but most of you, I would love if you turned on your video. And then that way we can pretend we have somewhat of an audience here, which is awesome. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Those of you who did, it's like less than half of you. So the rest of you, come on, you know, whatever, here's what happens to me. I'm actually wondering what you're doing that is so weird we can't see it on video. So as long as you're cool with that, keep your cameras off. And so Tony, I think the question you asked was, how did it start?
Yeah, what started off as an idea and then grew to a movement. What brought it about?
So, you know, Tony, in the early 2000s, my wife and I ran a pretty large real estate organization in South Florida. When I had been a consultant prior, and I sold my company, and I thought I was going to retire. That's awesome that I taught the class Debbie was in. I thought I was going to retire, and so I sold the consultancy. I had just met Katie. We were living in South Florida, and I was 6 weeks into retirement, and it was the longest 6 weeks of my life. And so I started buying houses. I actually bought a house like on the way home one day. I stopped at an open house for a damaged property and ended up buying a house where you could see daylight through the roof. And I was going to rehab it and sell it. And so I didn't ever rehab it. I think I painted 1/4 of one wall, gave up, and then hired people to do it, but ended up in a short period of time owning a ton of property. Katie and I, we became South Florida's largest home buyers in the early 2000s. We were ahead of home investors, ahead of a lot of the really well-funded investors out there. And we were running processes and systems to buy houses. Then 2007 rolled around, and you know, a lot of people, for those of you who are in the industry, especially if you were anywhere near Florida, you know, 2007 was really when things happened. The world kind of recognizes 2008, but in 2007, Katie and I were, you know, buying several, like anywhere from 3 or 4 to maybe a dozen homes a month. We were involved in somewhere around 20 transactions a month where we weren't buying them, we were wholesaling them, or Katie was a real estate agent, so she was helping people sell. man, don't look at Brent Young. It looks very weird what's happening with his camera. It's like there's almost a demon trying to poke through his face. Does everybody else see that? What's happening, Brent? I hope you're okay, man. And so, like I said, some people should turn their cameras on. And so what happened in 2007 was Katie and I went from selling a ton of real estate on a monthly basis to literally the market kind of dried up in about a 60-day period. There was some whispers of what was going on, and then there was some like issues with getting loans to go through and getting lenders to close. And then like all of the sudden, things just completely constrained and tightened up. We worked in the Tri-County area, and if you looked at numbers, I think it was right around like June, July of 2007, things just stopped. They just like nothing was closing. We had a bunch of the really unique mortgage structures that were out in the market were in South Florida. And so Katie and I were we're in a place where we thought we were like at the point of a really healthy retirement with all the equity that we had in properties and all the equity we had in the bank. And by the end of 2007, everything was completely upside down. We went from millions of dollars in the bank to having negative equity across the board. We had millions of dollars in equity, like approaching 8 figures in equity, and it went from that to completely flipped upside down. Katie and I started to get, we started looking at our numbers, and we realized like, because nothing was selling, because all of our revenue came from real estate, we were going to have a hard time making things happen. And so we went and met with an attorney, and we sat down with them towards the end of 2007 and realized we were going to have to declare bankruptcy. And we just weren't going to be able to keep everything afloat. We put all the money that we had in the bank into trying to make things work. We did what we could to do transactions while we could, but it really wasn't working out. And so we declared bankruptcy and stopped paying all of the bills, and we started getting foreclosure paperwork. And just to give everybody an idea of how dramatic it was in South Florida, we owned 4 properties in a community called Stonebridge Gardens, Florida. You can look it up. It actually became kind of famous because, in the investing classes, when they say, you buy real estate doesn't go away. Like, it's a hard asset. It's never going to disappear. We figured out that you actually can have properties disappear. Like when you have 4 condos in a place called Stonebridge Gardens, Florida, and the entire thing gets condemned, our properties went overnight from $160,000 to $180,000 in value. And we were about 50% loan to value on them. To give you an idea of how fast things crash and how hard they crash, one of those condos, the cheapest of the 4, at its lowest selling price was $15,500. It was over a 90% loss in real estate, 90. And so it was incredibly traumatic for us. We were going through all of this pain, all of this frustration. There was this woman named Pam, who was a process server in South Florida. And she used to come to this area where Katie and I were living, where we lived in a gated community. So every time she came, we got warning that she was coming. And so from her driving from the gate to like getting to our house, it would always have my stomach in knots. I remember the day that I opened the door, and Reagan, who's our now 15-year-old, she's like, "Hi, Pam." And I'm like, holy crap, my kid knows the name of the process server that's coming to give us court documents. Like, that's how challenging things got for us. And I started looking at the foreclosure paperwork, and any of you who have seen foreclosure paperwork, it's probably one of the scariest documents that ever gets issued. It's got like stamps and judges' signatures, and it has all this language that's super aggressive and feels really uncomfortable, like you broke the law or something. And I started looking at all the paperwork, and also at how the lenders were treating us, and how it was really hard to get information or talk to anybody. And I remember telling Katie, like, this is going to be a disaster. And I didn't really understand the numbers, but I was frustrated. I wanted to know why we were having such a hard time. I wanted to know what was going on in Florida. I wanted to know, like, what was the catalyst for all of this? And I kind of had an inkling because I was a mortgage broker. I remember going to a training at the mortgage office where I had my license. And the owner of the mortgage office had said, like, you've got to come in for this training. It's this amazing mortgage company called Southstar Mortgages. We're going to be able to close anybody. And I'm like, what does he mean by we're going to be able to close anybody? And I went in, and this guy from Southstar introduced the pick a payment ninja loan. So it was 3 payment options, one of them which was negative amortization, and you could get it with no job, no income, no assets. It was stated everything. Right. And I remember walking out and calling Katie and being like, holy crap, they're just giving money away. Like, anybody can get finance now. You don't even have to have a history, like barely have to have a social security number. And so I knew there was I understood some of the issues that were going on. By the way, I knew that day when I went to the training, something was wrong, because the guy who was training and I walked out of the office together, and I was asking him, like, how can you fund these loans? How does this work? Like, we could just take anybody with a social security number and do everything stated. And basically they have to make a few like statements, I would call allegations about themselves, and you're going to give them money. And as we were walking, I walked him to his Ferrari. And I'm like, wait a second. Why is a mortgage rep driving a brand new Ferrari? Like, something is not right in what's going on. And so while we were going through bankruptcy, I started doing research on the market. And I don't know if you remember this, Tony, but in 2008, the National Association of Realtors, all of the major lenders, most of the title companies were saying that we were in a 6-month to a 1-year crisis. Do you remember this?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest deniers of a bubble existing and any issues potentially happening was our industry.
Yeah,
we were drunk on our own success.
Yeah, and it was really, I mean, I don't mean to point fingers super hard at the National Association of Realtors, but they put out press releases in 2008 that they've now removed from their website because they were so biased and so completely and totally 100% wrong. Like, they've actually gone historically and cherry picked the stuff that they've left on their site from that time period, because the economists at NAR were like, they were off the deep end wrong. And what happened was, I had been a consultant. I'd run some pretty large organizations. I've worked with some multinationals, and I started doing research on the market. And I remember the day where I found, like, it all kind of came together on this single day where I found all of I found all the charts on how many mortgages had been written in the United States. Then I found a breakdown of what type of mortgages they were.
Yeah.
And then I found a chart of where those mortgages were amortizing, or like what the due dates were on amortization.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember looking at it all together, putting it into a spreadsheet, looking at how many homes were being sold. And I went out to Katie and I'm like, so Katie, they're saying we're in a 1-year crisis. I think it's 10 years, 7 to 10 years, no problem. It might be longer. And I showed her all the numbers, and there was no denying the numbers. Like, these were numbers that I was getting from the industry. And so I think you remember this, Tony. I started talking about it. I started talking about it really loud. I started writing articles and white papers and sharing it with local brokerages. And God, it was crazy during that time period, because NAR and a couple of the larger lending organizations actually targeted me directly. They came and said, that I was wrong and that I was spreading rumors. And so I got like some really weird stuff going on at that time. I was sharing what I thought was reality. And we had brokers like calling us and yelling at us. We had some really interesting scenarios in the beginning there. And what ended up happening was I kept talking about what I was talking about. And it started like evolving that we were in a much bigger crisis than what we thought. And as I was researching all of this and trying to understand what had happened to me, I saw this opportunity that this was my belief from the very beginning, is that most homeowners did not want to go to foreclosure. Most homeowners didn't want to throw the keys in the house and go away. I also had this belief system that there was at least a percentage of realtors, not all, certainly not all, but at least a percentage of realtors, and I can see some of them on this call, like Gilda and Dolores and you, Tony, and Scott Sakata, dude, so good to see you, Scott. I had this belief that there was a percentage of realtors who wanted to have answers for their clients. And then I had this crazy belief that everybody thought I was nuts, that there was realtors that would be willing to work for free to help somebody who was in distress. And I also had this belief that if realtors could understand what was going on and they could sit down with a homeowner and they could create the trust that they did in a listing presentation or the trust that they did in a buyer presentation, that if they could create that same type of trust with a homeowner going through foreclosure, they could help walk them out of that foreclosure. And I remember sharing that belief system with a few people early on, and they thought I was crazy. They're like, realtors just want money. They're not going to work for free. You tell a realtor they're going to work for free, they'll laugh at you and walk out of the room and all this other stuff. And so we wrote the CDPE designation, and I started going to offices in South Florida right at the end of 2007 and sharing with like small groups of realtors, like, here's what we're doing, and this is what the designation is. And, we put together a process that we know will help you walk homeowners out of foreclosure, potentially negotiate a sale. It wasn't even called a short sale back then. There was no short sale departments in banks. There was nothing like that. Like, we were dealing with, a lot of times we were dealing with like vice president of assets and really weird title people within banks. But we put together this system where in a short period of time, a realtor could sit down with a homeowner, gain the information they needed, and then present a offer to the bank. And somebody just put workouts. When you just said workouts, my neck got kind of tight, because that's what they were talking about. Yeah. It was like the hardest thing in the world to do. Oh man. But
hey, so, Alex, if I could, only because I have you for such a limited time, and I know that the insights that, because, and I do want to also, I want to flesh this out a little bit, because there's some serious history between you and I and Katie, and a lot of folks, and I think it's worthy of bringing it up. And I'll take a long story and make it very short, but we met, I think it was October of 2008. And what a lot of people don't know is I was promoting another speaker's short sale class. And I had this amazing idea that the next step was to create a certification, right? Because you got to have one, right? And I came up with the ultimate one, the accredited short sale specialist. And then you looked at the initials and it was ASSS. And I started thinking, that ain't going to resonate. And then I came across, I get this freaking email from this company called CDPE designation. And I went, they beat me to it. You know what they say, when you can't beat them, you join them. So I reached out to you. We met actually at the Miami board. I was walking out, you were walking in to teach a class. And I reached out to you and you said, let's connect. And man, if you just go by first impressions alone, it isn't always right. Because first of all, you wanted to meet at a vegan restaurant. That was a huge red flag.
It was actually Thai. It was Thai. It's okay. But there was a lot of vegan options.
Okay, then. And then you're wearing a political t-shirt of the candidate I was not endorsing. So I was sitting across the table from you going, this ain't gonna work out. And somehow, some way, we got to the point where you invited me to the NAR convention to work the booth that was happening 2008 in Orlando. And that's where I met the gorgeous Dolores Roth walking down the aisle. I ran up to her and I went, oh, I hear that you are the best at what you do. But I want to put on record something that you and I, that a lot of folks don't know. But my wife and I were going through a terrible, terrible time during that time. We got drunk on our own Kool-Aid, my fault. And I was losing our home, our properties. I didn't know how I was going to make the payment. And I went to Katie and I says, listen, I love what you guys are doing, but I'm going to have to go get a real job. And I guess she talked to you and you called me to the back area and you sat me down and you said, we like you. We don't want you to go anywhere. Here's a check for $1,500. You're going to get another check for $1,500 in 2 weeks. And with tears in my eyes, I was able to get on the phone with my wife and say, we're going to be able to keep our home. And to this day, that cemented a bond that I have with you and Katie that nothing could break. And I joined the organization, taught my first class in 2009. Imagine trying to fill your shoes, bro. That was not fun. Okay. I remember going to a class in Arizona and the title company said, where's Alex? And I says, they didn't send Alex, they sent me. And they went, we don't want you. We want Alex. And I went, this is the right way to start a class. And there's like 150 people in the room, right? This is great for my ego. And I guess I held it together and I said, look, let's do this. Why don't you just give me a chance? And then we'll go from there. And it kind of worked out. And we did some great things together. I went on to teach quite a few people, had the honor and privilege of being the trainer of the trainers. And then, then Dolores Roth joins the organization and just destroys all my numbers and takes everything I did.
Whoa, Tony, hang on a second. So Tony's being way too humble. So the way I remember that situation is that, Katie and I put together the CDPE designation. We taught a few classes. Dolores was actually in the first one, January 27th and 28th in South Florida. which was ironic because it was actually at a hotel that was going from one brand to another brand. So we were teaching the distressed property course in a distressed hotel. The room smelled like so much mold. Do you remember, Dolores? Like everybody's nose was running, and it was like, and so by the time we connected, Tony, I had taught the class about 10 or 15 times. And then you started teaching in 2009. And for me, it was like giving up like a baby, because it was something that I had done. It was so hard to transition. It was so hard to give it to Tony. And I was like, I remember thinking at the time, like, I hope he can do as almost as good as I do, because I'm going to be the best at this always, since I wrote it. And within about 2 or 3 classes of Tony teaching, his scores based on the students were exceeding my scores. So it was not only like giving up my baby, it was also a massive blow to my ego that Tony went out and started actually teaching at a level where he was getting higher scores than I was. I remember watching one of his classes and taking notes and being like, I'm gonna get back to number 1, but I never did.
Oh man, you're way too kind. One of the things that was really interesting about our dynamic is you had 2 very alpha males, there, and there were times when we clashed and everything else, because we never were short of opinions. But my respect for you just has no bounds, and we all know who the power behind all of this is, and that's Katie. Where would the CDPE be and everything else without Katie there? But if I could now, you made a decision, and I would imagine it was a business decision, a difficult one, to eventually just stop supporting the CDP. And one of the biggest questions I still get, the emails that come in, is I'm trying to log in and I can't get in, and I have a canned response that I send out to them. But what brought you all to that decision to just say, it was a good run, but we're done?
So, the way that the CDP grew, just to give everybody some perspective on the growth of this designation, it was the fastest growing designation in the history of real estate. It also became the largest designation in the history of real estate within a 7-year period. And the numbers were overwhelming. We did $500,000 in the first year, 7.2 in the second, 9.97 in the third, and then we went on to like 12 and 14, and we went from a 2-person team to a 40-person team to a 70-person team to a 100-person team. Most of the time running the CDP was like hanging on for dear life and just trying not to break things and trying not to, like, first do no harm, like make sure we're putting the right information out there, make sure we're putting the right stuff out there. And so it was this massive runaway success. And what happened was, the reason was, other than the National Association of Realtors, most of the organizations that originally were criticizing me in 2008 became our partners. Like in 2008, Bank of America was saying I was crazy. For the reps in South Florida were actually naming me by name and saying, oh, he doesn't know what he's talking about. And then they became one of our major partners. Remax became one of our major partners. Keller Williams regionally did. Century 21 at the highest level. So what happened was, we had all of these very high level partnerships with not just the brokerages, but the title companies and the banks. And so supporting the designation was also supporting all of those organizations. And it got to the point where, I actually remember the day where I knew we were going to have to like change what we were doing. In 2013, we did this huge broadcast out of our office. And by the way, this was before Zoom. We actually had to like build a broadcast studio in our office. We were using the same software that like the presidential debates and the Olympics were using. And so it was this huge investment. And we had this woman named Lori Maggiano come into our office to share what was going on, the most recent information, what was going on. I'm muting Patricia Jones. It's like only on a webinar with real estate agents do you accidentally unmute so you can be heard. I mean, I know you guys like to talk, but I'm just teasing. Lori Maggiano came into our office and we were casually talking on this broadcast, and she's saying like, these are the updates from the FHFA and these are some of the numbers we're seeing. And then she turned to me and she said, Alex, I'm excited to share this with you. And I waited until we were live so that everyone could hear it with you. And she said, you have this slogan, solving the foreclosure crisis one homeowner at a time. And I want you to know, my team and I have looked at numbers, and it looks like from our most recent calculations, this was 2013, she goes, you have, your organization and the realtors that you've worked with and the millions of deals that you've helped close have pulled forward the recovery of the foreclosure crisis by 5 years, at least, maybe 7. And I remember hearing it live and thinking like, oh my God, this is amazing. I kind of got emotional about it. And I was like, man, we set out to save homeowners and this is so exciting. And at the same time, the back of my mind was like, wait a second, 5 to 7 years, It's 2013. Her previous estimate was 12. Now we're in, and I'm like doing the math and I'm like, oh God, we're there. We're at the recovery. We're at the place where things are going to start turning and getting better. And it was like within just a few months, the CDP, we had trouble selling it. And there was a few like smaller areas in the country where there was still a lot of foreclosure activity, but there was so many CDP agents. We trained almost 50,000 real estate agents. There was so many CDPs that they were able to take care of the issues that were there. And so when the business slowed down, we supported the designation and we kept all of the assets together for a couple of years. And then it just got to the point where it wasn't financially feasible anymore. It wasn't operationally feasible. It was really hard for us to start the new business that we're running now while we were still trying to support it. So we sunset the CDP, but we never like shut it down completely. We kept all of the legal work current. We kept all the domains current. We kept all the trademarks and everything else current because we knew that there was going to be another time where we would sell the designation and have somebody else do it. We also knew we weren't going to do it again. It was a very awesome time in my life. I loved what we got out of the CDP, but I didn't want to step back into this role and do it again. And so we knew eventually we were going to transition it to somebody else. And so that's why we made sure that it was ready to do that. And just so everybody knows, like in that wind down period, 2013, 2014, we got a ton of offers from people to buy the CDP. We actually got pretty large offers. And my name and reputation was so closely tied to it, and so was Katie's. And the relationships we had with people like Dave Linegar and at the very top of all the major brokerages, and the people that I was at the C-suite relationships with most of the major lenders and most of the major brokerages and in the government. And so transitioning the CDP to somebody else who was going to maintain all of that did not feel comfortable at that time. And so we held on to it, and then we sunset it, waiting for what we knew would be the opportunity for somebody to come along and do it again. And that's kind of what brings us here on this webinar today.
Yeah, and so we fast forward and so COVID hits, and I never stopped teaching short sales. It's our thing, it's our passion. I went on to become a broker, open offices and everything else, but just, that's like, it was your baby. It's just kind of like my area. So I would teach it from time to time, nothing formal. And then COVID hit, and you see millions of people going into forbearance. People that didn't even need it were going into forbearance. And I'm thinking, this is not going to have a happy ending, and so I started teaching a program called Short Sale Mastery. And then people started asking me, is it a designation certification? I'm like, maybe someday it will. And you ever just wake up in the middle of the night with an idea and you just go, holy crap, why would I ever consider, okay, auspicious timing there, thank you. Why would I ever consider starting something from scratch when the platinum level of all short sale trainings is there? And that's when I approached you and Katie. And you said yes. And I'm honored that of all the people that could have and would have bought it, everything else, you gave me an opportunity to go ahead and continue the legacy, which I truly see that as being a big part of my mission, is in continuing the legacy. And I do want to, toward the very end of our presentation, go ahead and mention some changes that we've made in the format and the delivery and everything else, because times have evolved. But one of the questions that I like to get cleared up right now, because people tend to be confused, is, I created the decision to buy the CP was going to be done in stages and bring it back. The first thing was acquiring it. No sooner did we acquire it, we want to bring it back. Not only bring it back, but then we want to offer the course and melding the best of the CDP before and the content that I was teaching it all into one. But for a lot of folks, they don't realize that the CDPE membership was never a lifetime membership, that it was a yearly renewal membership. And I get some pushback on some of that right now. It says, well, I got my CDP in 2008 and I'm a CDP for life. And I'm like gently saying, no, you're really not. This is an annual renewal. So one of the first things I did was give people an opportunity to reinstate and renew their membership. And I honored the old price of $99 per year. I didn't see a need to increase that. So and then when people renew, they get access to the back office, blah, 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 and everything else. So I just wanted to kind of slip that in there. As you look at this market, and I know you transition way beyond just real estate, and I would like to take a couple of minutes toward the very end to talk about what you're doing right now. But do you see some similarities with what we have going on right now? Because maybe it's better if I kind of share it this way by sharing my screen and bringing it to here. So can you see my screen okay there?
We can.
Yeah, so I've been using this. Another wave of foreclosures is coming. Oh my gosh, it's probably nowhere near what you went through back in the day, but I have been quasi-attacked over this. People had told me, you're out of your mind, you're ridiculous, there is no crisis, there is no this or that. And I can't help but feeling that this is the mindset of a lot of people there, you know? And so here's what I want to get straight for the record. Never have I used the term meltdown in any of these conversations. Never have I mentioned the term crash. These terms don't even exist in my lexicon. What I have simply stated is that we will see an increase in foreclosure activity. I didn't say it would be what it was like back in 2008 or any of this thing, but I guess I must have been right, because when you look at the latest numbers from Adam, it shows that we have a 5% increase over last month, October versus September, and a 76% increase against last year. So we are seeing more foreclosures, and it's simple. Look what happened. You strike down the moratorium where the foreclosure activity was being artificially held down. What do you think is going to happen? It's going to be increased. So are you and I on the same page there that we are going to see a continued increase in foreclosure activity across the country?
You know, Tony, I think when I look at the market today, I don't think that it's the same as 2007. You know, I think I've heard a whole bunch of people talking about like what the similarities are. And what we have to understand about the market that we had back then was that there were millions of really bad loans written. And so there were, when I say millions, there was millions and millions and millions of bad loans written in the early 2000s, and loans that didn't make any sense, and people who were going to, it was very predictable, people were going to end up in foreclosure. What we're seeing today is different. What we're seeing today is, you know, millions of people have lost jobs, and there is a ton of things that have happened with COVID that have affected small businesses. They've affected small business owners. They've affected the people who work in small businesses. You know, in some cases, certain industries have blown up. Other industries have almost withered up and gone away. And what we have had now for months is really kind of two different things that are suppressing what could be more foreclosure volume. And another one that's probably going to make a lot of foreclosure issues come true is that, you know, there's a lot of investors who have rental property right now. Katie and I are you know, we can afford it, but we are in a position where about 20% of our portfolio is not paying the rent right now. There's a lot of investors who are not going to be able to deal with that, and they're going to have trouble keeping their portfolios, going to have trouble keeping their houses. There's, like you said, there's 1.25 million mortgages in forbearance. The mortgage companies are being a lot more agreeable this time. They're doing a lot to try and make it so people can actually pay. But we all know that the numbers on forbearance historically, about half of forbearances end up in foreclosure. And in some cases, as high as 70% of forbearances have ended up in foreclosure. And so while I don't think that we are going to see this massive percentage of the market in foreclosure, I do think we're going to see increases. And because there are so few people out there who understand how to deal with a homeowner in foreclosure, I see an opportunity here for the agents who are willing to do this type of work. And what we know from the previous crisis is that if you're the agent who's known for doing this type of work, it creates massive reputational value and a lot of tons of referral business. We once did a survey. The average CDPE back then was getting 2 referrals per quarter that closed. So like a lot of agents don't do 8 deals in a year. A lot of the average CDPE was doing more than that just on referral business. And so I do think that there's an opportunity here. I think that the dynamic is completely different due to the massive shortage of housing that we have in the United States and, you know, the continued shortage of housing. But the dynamic for the individual homeowner, I don't think changes a lot. They're scared. They're frustrated. There's a tremendous amount of anxiety. There's a tremendous amount of questions. They need somebody who can create that trust with them and help them walk through a solution.
Completely agree. You know, one major change versus now versus back in the day is that for short sales was the market back then. I mean, let's face it, if you didn't know short sales, you weren't going to survive. Only the agents that had significant referral business were going to survive. And that's when we had audiences of 150 to 250 people at some of our venues, right? And it was safe to say that for every 10 houses in foreclosure back then, 8 or 9 would be underwater. And one of the first things that I try to instill in my students now in this day and age is don't assume that because they're in foreclosure that they don't have equity. What you have to do is engage. You have to engage the distressed homeowner because at the end of the day, there is no dignified exit when it involves foreclosure. So if you know how to engage, then you're going to quickly find out if they have equity. If they have equity, it's a regular sale. God knows you should know how to do that. But if they don't have equity, then you'll be trained on exactly what to do. And that's one of the biggest differences between today and back in the day. Does that make sense?
100%. And I think, there's a little more to what you said. It's not just being trained on how to understand that they have equity. It's being trained on understanding how to talk to a homeowner in distress. And, many of you have probably already done that. If you're CDPs, you've probably already done that. But the average real estate agent has a really hard time with that conversation. The average real estate agent doesn't know how to create a level of confidence and certainty with a homeowner that you can help them through the situation that they're in. And, even in 2007, 2008, there were deals that had equity, but homeowners didn't know it. They didn't understand it. There wasn't anybody who was there wasn't anybody who was able to explain it to them in a way that they truly understood and believed. And so I think that's a really big part of what's going to be necessary in this market, because I think as people who are involved in real estate, as people who do real estate transactions all the time, this is very normalized for us. But to a homeowner who starts getting foreclosure paperwork, it's like the biggest crisis they've ever had in their lives. It becomes immediately emotionally overwhelming. They don't know how to deal with it. They have a hard time understanding what to do next. And so the real estate agents who are willing to handhold them down that path are real estate agents that are going to end up with a lot of referrals and clients for life. It's 2015. The last short sale that Katie closed personally, I think, was in 2008 or in 2009, because we got so busy with the CDPE, she had to stop doing real estate. She still gets thank you notes sometimes from people that we worked with way back then. It's crazy. Like you create this bond with somebody because you've literally taken them out of one of the, if not the scariest financial situation they've ever been in.
Gotcha. A little transition. So, obviously I have to be able to defend my position. And when someone says, hey, listen.
And you sound like me in 2008, Tony.
I'm telling you, brother. And sometimes what was the toughest thing? And it's just a little sidebar here. No sooner than I announced I bought the CDP and I go on the Facebook page. Oh my goodness. You would have thought that I was accused of some crime or something. It was like, why are you a member of a CDPE group and you hate the CDPE? It was just amazing to me that there was that mentality out there. So I go, I better get some tough skin. But, we're all entitled to our own opinions, right? But not our own facts. And in part of defending my position that there is a need for this and that short sale training is still relevant is the fact of the large percentage of FHA purchases out there. Because in a couple of slides, we're going to talk about, are we truly an equity-rich nation as it's been claimed? And there's no doubt that there's been tremendous appreciation in the market. But you know who I think about? I think about FHA buyers. I think about FHA buyers that bought in the last year or two with only 3.5% down. And they go into forbearance. They're 18 months into forbearance. What little equity they had, how much of that has disappeared in all the missed payments? So I pull up this fact because God knows why I introduce logic and facts into a conversation, but there's about 632,000 FHA mortgages right now that are seriously delinquent. That means 90 days plus. And we all know that when you get to 90 and 120 days delinquent, that's when you start getting to the point of no return. 30 or 60 days, you can work something out. When it starts to get that late, And so I start pointing, and you know what, the other thing that really bothers me, who are the people that are using FHA mortgages? Usually folks that are maybe in an underprivileged capacity, right? So once again, this segment of the population is going to be devastated even more by the crisis that we're doing right now. So let's talk appreciation, because the naysayers, the detractors will tell me property values are the highest ever. My goodness, we're making so much money. And look, there's no doubt about it. What is it, about a 16% increase over year? So you hear different numbers, but you hear numbers as high as 16 to 20% increases in appreciation in just 1 year. What could go wrong, right, my brother? Well, listen, anybody ever hear of a gentleman by the name of Lawrence Yun, chief economist for NAR? He is quoted as saying, you should not expect 20% price gains on recent times. Those days are gone. So is it possible for real estate to actually not appreciate, Alex Charfen?
Oh, I mean, we've definitely had periods of time in the history of real estate where it didn't appreciate. 2007 to, I think it was 2008 or 9 was the only year in the history of real estate where there was depreciation, like actual reduction of values. I think it's interesting. It's funny that you said Lawrence Yun, because he's the guy who wrote a lot of the press releases a long time ago that were pulled down. But that was like a little bit of a memory from the past. I actually met him once. He didn't really like me very much, but yes, you know, there's a possibility. Like, and here's the thing about real estate. When you look at numbers, when you look at the numbers behind what's going on, you can see what's really happening in the market. If you look at foreclosure rates right now, foreclosure rates are up. You can't argue that. There's actually more foreclosures. If we're in this Valhalla market where every single property has equity and every single property has value, how is it that we're actually processing more foreclosures today than we did a year ago? And when you look at those numbers, it looks like they're only, you know, going up right now due to specific market conditions. And so I think with the shortage of houses that we have today, we're probably not going to see depreciation in the value of real estate. But I think in the last year, what we've seen is an artificial acceleration of real estate values. And maybe part of that is real value increase, but part of it's also an acceleration. There's been a lot of things that, due to the market crisis we're in, due to COVID, there's a lot of very unique conditions that we're dealing with in this market right now. There's a lot of people buying houses that normally wouldn't have bought houses. There's a lot of people switching houses. There's a tremendous amount of mobility around the United States where houses are being sold in one place, bought in another place, that is accelerating pricing in certain markets, accelerating pricing in almost every market. And I don't think we're going to see that frenzy continue. And so there may be a somewhat leveling off over the next 12 to 18 month period, but I don't think we're going to see things go backwards.
But see, this, and I hear you, but then I read this, you know, a small organization, Mortgage Bankers Association, you know, they're not much to speak of, right? They only have what, several 100,000 people on there. My friend, you know what they say? They're actually anticipating that they might see a 2.5% year-over-year drop in home prices. When the Mortgage Bankers Association is saying, hold on a second, folks, you know, we're not only not going to see the increases that we were seeing, we might actually see some decreases. So none of us have a crystal ball. We're kind of projecting, but this caught my attention. Does this kind of surprise you that they would come out and say something like that?
You know, Tony, it does, but I also think that there's maybe a need for a price adjustment in the real estate market right now. When you look at the purchase price of entry-level housing, it's no longer entry level. It doesn't, there's, you know, the average sale price in the United States for entry-level first-time buyer housing has gone up so much that it's really no longer something that most people can afford. And so I'm somewhat surprised with what the Mortgage Bankers Association has come out with, but I also think, like you said, no one has a crystal ball. There's a lot of conjecture going on right now, but if I was still involved heavily in real estate, I think it's a lot better to be prepared for what could happen than to deny what possibilities there are out there, especially if this is where you make most of your money. And then this is the big one. So this could potentially change everything in the real estate market. It depends on how fast the interest rates go up. But because we've had artificially suppressed interest rates for years now, really since 2007, if you look at it, 2007, 2008, interest rates started to get suppressed, and then they just got pushed down and pushed down and pushed down and pushed down. And we're now seeing the market effects of that. But the issue is that a buyer, an entry-level buyer, can afford X number of property with the interest rate that they got. If that interest rate goes up by 15% or 20%, that means the next buyer can only afford 15 or 20% less. And so it creates a market dynamic where you had an entry-level buyer at an established price point, and now that entry-level buyer can no longer reach that price point. And so this is the dynamic that I'm watching most closely to see what's going to happen in the market soon. I mean, we all know real estate cyclical, it's coming.
And then you got inflation, right? 5.8% in October, highest since December of 1990. I don't think this bodes well for our economy.
No, and I think, if you look at right now, it's the highest since it was in 1990. But for anybody who's as old as Tony and I are, and I'm 50, I'm 49. I would just turn 49, and I was around not with full consciousness, but during the Carter administration, where inflation went up into the double digits. Mm-hmm. And even though there was a housing shortage in the United States, new construction went to a negative number. And so in the next year, 2, 3 years, nobody has a crystal ball, but those people who are saying like real estate's going to appreciate forever and the next 10 years are going to be a golden time in real estate. I've actually heard these things recently. Whenever people start talking like that, it makes me nervous. And I think one other thing, Tony, when you look at how interest rates have gone up slightly, I don't know if all of you are seeing this, but a dynamic that I've seen recently is that some of the mortgage companies are getting into some more exotic packages again. Oh, yeah. Because that entry-level buyer can't get in, you're starting to see some weirdness, like some no-doc loans. You're starting to see some weird amortization loans. You're starting to see some weird reset loans. And so when the paper gets exotic, you should be scared for the whole market.
I completely agree. It's deja vu all over again, right? All right, so we got to talk about this because one of the biggest points made against the resurgence of short sales is that we just such an equity-rich nation because we have had tremendous appreciation. So I started doing a little bit of research on this, and then I came across an article that basically stated, and I think you probably would agree with this, that it's a precursor when people start using their home as an ATM. It's kind of like the beginning of the end. And I'm looking at numbers, and in the second quarter of this year, we had $63 billion in equity pulled from the market, which was the largest quarterly volume since 2007. In 2005, because I was looking at it and saying, 2005 is when the world was good. Remember that? Real estate was happening in 05 and 06. $101 billion in equity was pulled out of the third quarter of 2005. And look what happened in 2007. So any warning signals you seeing there?
I mean, I think here's the warning signal. We just all have to look at reality. If people pull equity out of their homes, then they're in a less equity position, and then there's less margin on any type of a crisis or any type of an issue or any type of a slowdown or a pricing issue or anything like that. And, I think you've brought up the two categories that I think are the most concerning, Tony. FHA loans where there is very little money down and people can almost immediately be upside down. Oftentimes loans that are closing right now today close in an upside down state. And in some areas where pricing's raising really fast, maybe they catch up in a few months, but we can't count on that. The second place that things get kind of dicey and in trouble is when people start pulling out massive amounts of equity. When they do that, they put themselves way closer to loan to value and put themselves in a precarious position as to if anything adjusts in the market, what are they going to do? And so, yeah, Tony, I think there's concern here. And again, it kind of feels like the same type of foreshadowing we had back in 2007. I think we're going to see sometime in the next few years, with this rapid inflation, the cost of money is going to have to go up. When the cost of money goes up, we're going to eliminate an entire group of buyers. When we eliminate that entire group of buyers, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Who's going to buy the homes that need to be sold?
Absolutely. I'm also concerned about where the money is going that you're pulling out. Some of these are kind of iffy areas. You know, when I see single large purchase, boat, car, jewelry, a second property, you know, how many of them are putting it into
investment opportunities? I didn't mean to cut you off, Tony, but investment opportunities where if you look at what most people like investment opportunities today, they're going into two places, crypto and the stock market. That's where a lot of people are putting money. And those are two very volatile markets right now. You know, I have a ton of investment in both, but I've also been investing in crypto since 2012. So I'm not a newcomer. The people who are coming in now are not very aware of what's going on. They don't understand the opportunities. And you know, the other place where you know people are putting their money is in the stock market, because it looks like it's this runaway success story, but there are going to be adjustments, and so it doesn't take much to send markets into a huge shift or a tailspin.
Gotcha. You just took the words out of my mouth. So quick commercial for the CDP, then I want to get to people's questions, because obviously there's folks maybe on the call that are the OGs. Or maybe, you know what we have found is a lot of the original CDPEs and everything have wanted to take the refresher course because they've been out of the game now for as long as 10 years or longer. And there may be some people on the call that have never, ever taken the CDPE. So obviously, we look for folks that have the motivation to help distressed homeowners. That has to be very high on your list. If you're saying, I want to get into this niche because I want to make a ton of money, well, you may not have the right mindset. Well, let's start with, let's help the distressed homeowners. And what I've always said is you can do, some people, you know, make a living and some people make a difference. And then there's CDPEs and we can do both, you know, but the CDPE baby is back. It's 100% back. I have taught several rounds now. And one of the biggest changes from back in the day is that it's all Zoom based right now. And that's not how it's going to stay. That was just because of necessity, because of COVID. But I got to tell you, Alex, I kind of like not having to get dressed up and get on a plane and maybe miss a flight like the one I almost missed in Atlanta. And I think you lost more hair during those few hours of whether I was going to grab that flight or not. But man, you know, I get to teach this from the comfort of my own office in a what you call a space training environment. So it's not so overwhelming. 5 weeks, 5 2-hour sessions where I can build one layer on top of the other. And it's been very well received being able to teach it this way. We will get back to live trainings as the world opens up again, but this is working very, very well. And like before, we cover soup to nuts. I always like to tell people I'm going to cover A through Z, but I'm not going to start at H. You know, I got to start at A. And it was been very gratifying for the very experienced CDPs to say, you know what, I needed this. This reminded me of why I did this before. But one of the main focuses for me right now was to take agents away from the negotiation aspect of the business. You know, we spent a lot of time in the original class teaching agents how to negotiate because we had no choice. Nobody else knew how. But now I'm a big believer that leave that to the ones that have done that consistently for a living, and you focus on engaging and convincing and influencing people to take action, to list, sell, rinse, and repeat. And I know that I actually went to you and Katie and say, Katie, guys, I want to tell you right now, the one biggest change that I'm going to make in the CDPE, because most of it I'm leaving untouched, is I do not believe that agents, they can if they want to. I'm not the boss of them. I just don't encourage them to do their own negotiations. So your feeling on that?
You know, Tony, I think the market, like you said, has shifted dramatically. And back when we were doing this, especially initially, short sale negotiators, it was like the wild, wild west. And the fees and stuff that were being charged were egregious in a lot of cases. And the short sale negotiators weren't any better than most agents. I think, you know, the market's matured and it's in a totally different place today. And I think that as a real estate agent, the key is building the relationship, building the trust, keeping somebody engaged and in the deal throughout the entire deal. And if it's easier to have somebody else negotiate the short sales, that is really the toughest part of the business, other than keeping the homeowner engaged. And so I think it makes sense.
Okay. And of course, the benefit to just not only the course is the 1-year membership in the community, which comes with a plethora of different benefits and everything. I'm not going to get into all those details now, but I'm really happy that the dashboard is back and people can get into the dashboard. They can download the resources. They can add themselves to define a CDPE roster. We even have an affiliate component where they can make a little extra money helping us grow the brand and everything else again. So we've kept the price as affordable as possible. It's only $399 for everything that I've been mentioning so far. At this point in time, I'm personally teaching every session, but we have some of our, you know, we're kind of putting the band back together. So we have people on the sidelines there, Troy, Sage, Aaron, we have Dolores, we have all these individuals that are behind the scenes. I have an amazing mastermind group. Debbie is on there. Natasha Tello, of course, is on there and everything else. But the next session is starting in just a couple of weeks. I wanted to squeeze one more session in there before the holidays. This will be the first one that I don't do in consecutive weeks because we're going to skip 1 week for Christmas. But we teach them from 1 to 3 Eastern. And I know the first thing somebody says, don't you understand it on the West Coast, blah, blah, blah. And I go, chill out a second, hold on. I thought of this already. Every session is recorded. So there is no missed content. So if I have 100 people that are scheduled for a class, I may have 50 or 60 at any given session. And then they know that that evening they get the recording. And you know what I've been doing, Alex? Maybe I'm not as good a businessman as I should be. I haven't even put an expiration date on the recordings because I think timing is very important. Someone may not be at the right stage of their life to really have paid attention and listen to everything as they should. So I just kind of leave it open. So if 3 or 6 months in the future, they want to play those 5 sessions again, they can. They can, and that puts them in a position where they can help a homeowner. Hey, look, you taught me that you gotta have a close, right? Man, dude, do you remember the first time you allowed me to do the CDPE preview? You had always done them. We did this now, and I did one, and it was my first one. And dude, when I was done, I curled up in the ball and in my bed, and I was like, I'm such a failure. I can't believe I sucked that badly. And then I think it was you or Katie reached out to me and goes, dude, the registrations are coming in fast and furious. You've done good. So I got out of the bed and I continued with my day. My ego's fragile, man. I was like, I didn't do as good as Alex, but I wanted to give people an incentive to sign up now. And that's $299 with the code that you see on the screen. But that's not the price that the old guard gets. See, the old guard, when they renew at the $99, they get the course for only $150. So I wanted to help folks kind of refresh themselves again. And so what happens is there's a special code that you need for that. And obviously I can't publish that code or all of a sudden I'd have a lot of 150 sales. But what people typically do is they get the emails from us that say, you should renew, you should renew. Well, click on that email. That takes you to the link to renew. No sooner you renew at the $99 a year, you get the code and you can sign up for any of the classes that are coming up. And then at this point, you okay with some Q&A for a few minutes, Alex?
Sure, absolutely.
And look, as I'm starting to buy me a little time as I look through the chat, bring us up to speed on what you and Katie have been doing now. What do you guys do?
So I'll quickly share with you, Tony. So in 2011 or 2012, a lot of the CDP agents who we had trained were now running really large real estate teams and businesses. And so we started training on business growth systems. And so we have continued doing that since 2011. And today we run a company that helps with simplifying the operations for business owners. We show entrepreneurs how to build teams, build empires without doing it all themselves, and get the results that they really want out of their businesses. We work primarily in the online space with a lot of coaches, product creators, e-commerce companies. We also do a lot of brick and mortar. We work with a lot of retail organizations and a lot of service businesses, and we show entrepreneurs how to make things easier on themselves and how to create the space that they really want. You know, we always joke that entrepreneurs are the only people who would give up a 9 to 5 so that you can work a 9 to 10 on a daily basis. And I don't mean in the morning. And so we show entrepreneurs how to systematically get their time back and grow their business. And if anybody wants to connect with us, or you're a CDP and you'd like to kind of follow along with what we're doing, we have a group on Facebook called Operating Your Business Just Got Simple. And if you join that group, we're actually sharing all of the information around our rebrand, around our new products, around how we're navigating the changes that we're going through right now, and the transitions we're going through. So it might be fun for you to follow along if you're interested.
Awesome. So I'm looking at some of the questions here. One question was asked about the use of Equator. It's still there. Primarily B of A uses it. But, you know, as much as technology has advanced, we're still faxing in packages, if you can imagine that. You know, maybe this time around they're actually going to an electronic fax number, but it's still old school when it comes to sending in the packages. So we're getting a lot of folks that are going ahead to saying hello. We have a lot of folks that took your class personally, Alex. It's gotta be fun for you to see some of these folks over here, right?
It's awesome, Tony. I mean, especially some of the names and people that are here. You know, when the CDP first came out, I feel like it was the pioneers who were willing to take the class. It was the people who, the bravest realtors in the market, were the ones who were willing to sit down with a homeowner in the amount of distress that was there back then. I don't think this market's any different. The realtors who are willing to put in the time here and the willing to make the declaration that they'll work with somebody in distress and go out and help people like this. It's the bravest realtors. It's the most engaged. It's the ones that care about their clients, but also about their markets the most. So it's nice to see that reflection again.
Okay, it says here, as for a former CDP, I've been very active. I still teach and train. Do we have to take the designation again? That's a great question. You do not have to take the course again. If you're on our database of OGs, where you have access to renew at the $99. I just need to verify. And so you'll know you're on that list if you received an email from us that says, hey, you should renew, then you know. The course itself is optional. Is it recommended? Why not? Especially if you've been out of the game for a while, but it is not required. Alex, one question I get asked a lot. Someone will ask me and they'll say, well, where should I start? How do I start? Where do I begin? And my answer is simple: work backwards. And they're gonna look at me like, what? I go, well, think about it. You ought to have 3 different categories of distressed homeowners: A, B, and C list. The A list are the folks that have an actual sale date. And you know that those are the folks that have no time and should have fewer excuses for taking action. So I would say, even with the suppressed foreclosure activity, we are seeing foreclosures again. Now, of course, if you're on the West Coast, if you're in Oregon, if you're still in states where the foreclosure moratoriums are still in place, you're not there yet. But for everybody else, you can go wherever your county foreclosures happen. You can look up services. You can look on Realty Track. You can go ahead and look on Land Voice. All these guys, pull up the ones that have an actual sale date, and then know what to say, when to say it, and how to say it when you approach them. Category B are folks that don't have a sale date yet, but they are formally in the foreclosure process, right? They've been served. They either notice a default or less pendants, but you know what? They are moving faster through the process. C category are the folks that are delinquent, but not yet formally in foreclosure. They're the ones that are the hardest to convince. You know why? They have every reason to believe that they might still be able to work something out. But those are the ones that you don't reach out to as frequently, but you definitely do. Okay. All right. So I think I answered the same question again. Do I need to take the course? No, you do not have to take the course, but I remember one time, Alex, somebody came to a class in Atlanta, and you know how he greets me? He goes, "Hey, my name is so-and-so. Am I going to learn anything today?" And I'm going, and I said, well, I don't know what you know. So we'll just have to wait and see. It's amazing how you could be doing something and yet you get a different perspective, or you just pick up a different script or dialogue that you can use that can make you tens of thousands of dollars. I have here, thank you, Alex and Tony. It's great to see you again, Alex. I totally agree that we need to be prepared for the worst and hope for the best. CDP is the right track. No doubts the market. Oh, this is wonderful stuff. Thank you so much here. Can we just renew our subscription? Absolutely. Covered, asked, and answered. So please write this email address down. If you guys have any questions at all, it's support@cdpe.com. Support@cdpe.com. That's where you reach out to me. And I answer every single one of these emails myself. Next year we'll staff up, but I wanted my fingerprints on every aspect of this transition because I knew there was so much at stake. I didn't want to leave it to anyone. And Alex, I need your training. Like I can't tell you, man, this entrepreneur stuff, bro, multiple businesses, everything's going great, but sometimes you don't know what to do because you're like, So I got to talk to you and Katie to see how I can get in on some coaching and training from you guys there. Do you have any data on state by state distressed homeowners? I personally don't. I think what happens is understand something, that no one really should have access to people's data when they're delinquent. It's nobody's business that they're delinquent. Okay, what happens is once it becomes public information because they have been served, then there's multitude of places you can get, from sources like I mentioned. In fact, your own MLS, if you use IMAP, Realist, you can go in there and pull them up right then and there. But when people ask me, hey, I want the names and emails of people that are 30 and 60 days late, I go, even if I had it, I wouldn't give it to you. It's none of our business, okay, because it's not yet public information. Okay,
Tony,
how much
I have some information on that state by state question. Yes. So you can look up state by state foreclosure rates, and it's actually kind of shocking, the disparity in like the 50th state and the number one state. So the 50th state, the one with the least foreclosures, is South Dakota. It's only 1 in every 77,000 households. But if you go to the the highest level state, this is for September of this year, it's Florida, and there's 1 in only let's see here, 3,276 households. So it's like 100 times less, or 100 times more than South Dakota. And the top 5 states today are Florida, Illinois, Delaware, Nevada, New Jersey, and Indiana. Starts feeling a little bit like an echo of 2006, but all of those states, and I think it's up to about the 20th or 30th state, is more than 1 in every 10,000 homes. It's not huge numbers, but we're definitely seeing movement in the direction of there is more foreclosures happening and there's more foreclosures coming.
Completely agree. Florida, we're usually number 1 in a lot of the bad polls, right? So you know what, Adam, I guess they acquired a Realty Track, right? And so they have a report. You just go to the website, and it shows highest seriously underwater states. Mississippi, for example, 17.7% are seriously underwater. So you can tell Wyoming 11.5, Louisiana 10.7, Iowa 8.4. These are underwater. So those are built-in short sales right there. The renewal is $99 a year. I mean, that number is not guaranteed for life, but I don't have a reason to raise it right now. I keep my overhead very low because I want to provide as much value as possible. Okay. Thank you for all the thank yous, everyone. We have different email. Okay. So Melissa, just email me to support@cdpe.com. I'll verify that you have renewed. Once you renewed, I'll send you the discount code that you can sign up for the class at the 150. Hey, Alex, I did something very cool, brother. I hope I did the right thing, but I added another payment method now. They can actually pay in crypto.
Nice.
I think that's kind of cool, right?
I support that. I'm a huge crypto crypto guy. So just there's a couple questions here, Tony, that I want to make sure we get to. So Charles Mortimer asked about the CIS designation.
Yes.
Brandon Louder, who's actually on this call, I think Brandon's here. He recently purchased the CIS designation from us, and he plans to do similar to what Tony did and bring it back. And so we're excited to see that happen. And we're excited to see an entire refresh of that course, especially with the massive amount of investor activity right now. And then one other question, I used to get this all the time, Tony, you and I probably answered this 1,000 times. Rashid Wakoya asks, he'd like more clarification on it. Is it illegal to advise a distressed homeowner to file for bankruptcy? Is it legal or illegal? Does it constitute giving legal advice? There's a very fine line here, Rashid. You have to be cautious here. If you explain to a homeowner what their options are, there's nothing illegal about that. There's nothing about saying, here are the things you could do. Now, if you sit down with a homeowner and you say, here are the things you could do, and here's the one that I believe is right for you and the one you should do, you've crossed over into giving legal advice. And so going through somebody's options with them, laying it out and showing them what their options could be, that there's nothing illegal about that at all. You just don't want to be the person who specifically influenced the homeowner to do something. When it comes to bankruptcy, if somebody is considering filing bankruptcy, every one of you should have, this is it. Tony, I'm shocked how fast I'm slipping right back into being the CDPE. Every one of you should have a bankruptcy attorney on your team, like somebody who you know and you trust, and you have a relationship with them. And so when there's cases where it looks like there should be a bankruptcy, you can hand that off to a professional that keeps you safe and keeps your license intact and keeps you out of the firing line. What you don't want to do is appear to have influenced a homeowner in a way that you're giving legal advice around something that's out of the purview of being a realtor. Realtors are allowed to give legal advice around real estate. You end up doing it every time you take a listing. You're giving people advice. You're telling them how to sign a contract. You're telling them how to fill out paperwork. That's usually a domain that's only reserved for attorneys. But in the case of when you cross over into other options like bankruptcy, have a bankruptcy attorney on your team, lay people's options out for them. Don't persuade them to go in one direction or another. Lay them out in a way that you're giving them a real argument as to what they should do.
My friend, it's like looking in the mirror, because that's exactly how I answered the question, because it came up in our private group. And that is, you're just laying out options. And of course, every short sale dream team needs to have a foreclosure defense attorney and a bankruptcy attorney as part of it. So I appreciate the concern, but that's not an area to be concerned about. I would like to circle back to Brandon. Brandon was one of the CIAS trainers, and he probably taught more CIAS. And for a lot of folks that aren't aware what CIAS is, that was the investment course that you created as well.
Certified Investor Agent Specialist.
Absolutely. And I'm so excited that Brandon has acquired it, because Brandon and I are working closely together. He is going to be very instrumental in helping me bring back the advanced program. So now we're going back into memory. People said, hey, I remember there was this program that every month you gave me marketing materials. I had a website for distressed properties and all that. It's coming, folks. In the next 30 days, we'll be introducing it. So remember I mentioned we're bringing this back in stages. We've already crossed over the 1,000 mark and people renewing and signing up. And I tell you, it's heated up in the last 3 or 4 weeks when people are seeing the writing on the wall, Alex. And I think this session is going to help a lot of folks. We could go on, but we've exceeded our time limit. From the bottom of my heart, I thank every single person that was on this call. When the replay is available, I'm going to send it out this evening to everyone that pre-registered. Something that you could do that I hope you will do is share it with other agents in your database that could have, should have, would have been on the call. And Alex, I can't begin to express my gratitude, brother, for you carving out this time and making yourself available. I'm in your debt.
Well, congratulations on the purchase, Tony. Katie and I were thrilled to be able to do this specifically with you as the first person who ever taught the CDP other than me. And as I think one of the spiritual and emotional leaders of the movement, it's really, it's exciting and validating, and and confirming that you're doing this. And I think, the CDP is in good hands, and so is anybody who joins the organization at this point. And that's what we wanted to make sure of. So thanks for being here, everybody. It was awesome to get to spend some time with real estate agents again. It's been a long time, and I missed y'all, especially some of you here that were involved at the beginning. And thanks for all the comments in the chat. I've been reading them. This was a tremendous amount of momentum for my day.
Awesome. All right, everyone. Thank you so very much. Happy holidays. Everyone stay safe. Take care. Bye, Alex.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.